Scott and Jenny Graham are changing the story from despair to relief for families impacted by the wide array of dysfunctions and addictions. They have been facilitating interventions and transport since 1988. They are both in recovery and are seasoned and trusted interventionists, keynote speakers, radio guests, and authors with an unparalleled reputation in the treatment field. Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery. Ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Nider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Today, Scott and Jenny Graham are with us, and they are all about changing the story from despair to relief for families impacted by the wide array of dysfunctions and addictions. We have been facilitating interventions and transports since 1988. Wow, that is incredible. And both Jenny and Scott are in recovery themselves. They've got their own journey there and are trusted interventionists, keynote speakers, radio guests, and authors with an unparalleled reputation in the treatment field. And today they are our podcast hosts. And Scott and Jenny, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh,
Our pleasure.
What a pleasure it is. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is super fun. And we were actually talking just probably Friday. We were talking to a couple, and they were sharing their story, and they work together, right? And so the question was, can a couple really work together? And it sounds like you guys do that really well. Can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, we're in different locations all the time.
Not all the time.
We're married remotely.
We have felt like that in certain seasons, for sure.
No,
The
truly
intervention work divides us. People pick between us.
Yeah, but no, the answer to your question, yes, I think if you have a solid friendship, for sure, and a willingness to work through, any kind of disagreements or conflicts or, whatever. I mean, we're all human and we are married and, marriage, it hasn't been hard for us. There's been hard moments and even, a season here or there. I mean, we're in today is our 35th anniversary as far as when we met, and we married 20 days later. So it's all in one kind of fell swoop. So we're still, rocking it. We're solid. We're still friends, and it's working.
Yeah, the key is that we're passionate about the same things.
Mm-hmm.
So, beyond the big things, the little things. Right down to, we're so fortunate because we like the same color. And let's paint the wall this color. Like, there's no argument. And one time I bought a couch over the phone I was in the showroom floor at Macy's, and Scott was home, and I went, hey babe, I really like it. And he's like, oh, well, if you like it, I'll love it, buy it. So that's the kind of relationship we have. And again, having met and married in under 3 weeks, it's like, oh, these people, they're like pull the trigger people. It's like, yep, when you know, you know. So we go with that gut feeling, and it does not steer us wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. So, okay, now you don't hear too often people that meet and marry 20 days later, right?
No,
so talk about that journey a little bit. And if you will, I also kind of want to know, did you meet prior to recovery, or did you guys do recovery together? That seems like that's tied into it, maybe in my head anyway, but talk about those pieces if you're willing.
So going back before we got married, I was an LA County Sheriff's deputy, and I was working undercover at Vice Narcotics. And through a variety of different personal incidents, situations, I was imploding, and I was falling apart from the inside out. You wouldn't know it by looking at me or by my arrest record, job performance, all of that. But I was definitely crumbling and crumbling fast. And I ultimately got arrested while on duty because instead of taking everybody to jail, I was taking half the people to jail and still more than anybody, letting half go. And I was ultimately, utilizing the drugs I was confiscating just to self-medicate, escape my implosion. And
So he was telling me this.
On the first date, yeah.
So, which was 24 hours after meeting. So he didn't tell me at the moment that we met. I always question, would I have really given him my phone number if I knew what he told me on the first date? I want to say yes. I think I would have.
Really?
Because ultimately I thought, gee, you're going to prison and you'll make a hot pen pal, and there'll be a whole lot less pressure than a face-to-face relationship.
Sure, to be sure.
So I was in recovery. That was our long-winded answer for I was in recovery. Scott was on the brink, on the verge of recovery. He was not in recovery yet. He would be shortly thereafter.
Yeah, it still took me a few months to fully embrace it because I had, like so many, I started it as a teenager, and I hit it hard from the very beginning. It was just something that worked for me, and I had the mental and physical fortitude to live that dual life from day one. And so, I maintained good grades in school, relationships, was nice and respectful to adults, and so on and so forth. I say it helped me maintain that from the beginning, but it ultimately hurt me because it's like any type of high profile person, whether it be a doctor, lawyer, first responder, whatever, they tend to hit a lower bottom because they can go so much further in their dysfunction without anybody really knowing and keeping people at bay, usually pretty good communicators. It's like one of those, I liken it to like a little kid who's living in a dysfunctional home, and this little child asks the adults, like, what's wrong? And the adults say, nothing. And, oh, but I think something is wrong. No, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. And then you start to not trust your own senses. And so that's kind of how I lived it. It looks like something's wrong. Nope, everything's fine. We're good. But it was a hard crash. It was a very hard crash. I was looking at 6 to 8 years in prison. I had gotten arrested in October. We met in May. So I've got this court case going on. And, then, like Jenny said, I told her everything, but it sounded like a really terrible decision on Jenny's part. I took the risk. Heck, I was like, come on. It's like a drug addict's dysfunctional person's dream. Meet a hot young gal who's making money, and then I'm thinking, great, she can take care of me. This is going to be good.
Well, but you lend to, as you talk about this, Scott. You make it sound so simple, but this gets pretty complicated. As you're an officer, right? You don't have weaknesses. You're not allowed that kind of stuff. There's that stigma that we talk about and try and overcome, but that's a reality. And here you are facing it and being willing to talk about it. Of course, Jenny's going to pick up on that and go, this guy might be all right, but he's in the heart of it. You'd been through recovery and you kind of knew what he was in for. He might not stick.
Well, no, here's the reality. So it wasn't that deep at first. The reality was that I was also strip dancing, and she had a party she had to get a strip dancer for, and I was it. So that was why she was attracted to me, I think, because I was going to give her a good deal.
Don't minimize that.
Yeah, well, the reason that happened, all my girlfriends were strippers because I was working the Sunset Strip in West Hollywood, and that was kind of my,
Well, it was the territory that you covered.
It was the territory and the people that I was, working, basically. And so, I jokingly say that, even though there is truth to it, it was only a small little period of time. But the funny story behind it is the first time I unknowingly meet my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, all the cousins, I'm dancing in a jean string. And Oh,
At that party that I hired him for
Yeah.
$75.
Yeah.
That was the best $75 I've ever spent. I'm gonna say I invested it
yeah,
because I'm still racking up the dividends 35 years later.
that's so funny.
Oh, that's incredible. What a story. Like, yeah, I've heard some good stories, but this was probably tops it right now. I'm just saying.
It was, I mean, and when he was in prison, like I brought his brother who looked enough like him to my work Christmas party. It's like, hey, Stevie, we're just going to hit the hors d'oeuvres and don't talk to anybody. Like, let's just like make an appearance. And actually they sound your voices even. I remember one time I called and your brother answered the phone and I started talking because I thought it was you. And then he finally said, hey, it's not Scott. And I was like, what? So all that to say that part of our story, and because of my own recovery and keeping all that a secret that I was struggling, et cetera, I could relate to Scott's story at every point, except for the point where he made ABC, NBC, CBS when he was arrested while on duty. So his fall was incredibly public, where mine was incredibly private. And regardless, I mean, we have that thing in common that we were both functioning. And so people nowadays, at least, people are not thinking every drug addict is living under the bridge and, you know, just doped up morning, noon, and night. I mean, we were using morning, noon, and night, but we were using at a pace where we were still able to live a double life. And so that's where I connected so deeply with Scott. And I wasn't even joking. I mean, I thought, how great would it be to have a pen pal, and how, especially for, you know, someone who's highly functioning in recovery, working 3 jobs, like how would I even have time to date anyway, right?
Right.
So here we are all these years later, and it's why we wake up every day so passionate about helping people, because we see all the time that it's the people who care about people the most that have the most influence and impact, and they have laid down that influence and impact. They have bought into a lie that says that they're powerless. They've traded in this idea of the fact that I could still motivate you, I could still be a reason, I could still help you take a step in the right direction. And I'm not saying that I can fight your addiction for you. I'm saying I can fight your addiction with you. And there's a real separation in the industry. And everybody wants to like only have their own tribe. Like, I'm going to my meeting and I'll see you later. And it's like, what about the people who we're related to, either by choice or by blood? And wouldn't they take a bullet for me? And yes, I would say they would take a bullet for you. And so why not let them into your recovery? And so that's our magic, is that we've let each other in. And I think so many people don't, and so many people are masters at compartmentalizing.
Well, what you've talked about is that you've I mean, because in recovery, right? In recovery, and if you're in a treatment, I don't know how you guys did this, but if you're in a treatment facility or in a treatment program, the one thing they say is you probably shouldn't be getting into any relationships, right? Because a relationship is the quickest way to relapse of anything that I've seen out there. And here you guys are. I mean, Jenny, you're in recovery. You probably know this piece, right? And maybe Scott doesn't have that right on board yet, but you know, and yet you still jumped into it. What made the difference for you?
Well, for us, you know, I was already stable in my recovery. I had a handful of years under my belt, and so they're talking about don't hook up in rehab where you're both new. And so they really haven't really defined that other. And for me, there were just so many things about Scott that overrode any kind of advice where people would go, "You're flat crazy." Right?
Well, and also too, it was a more of a spiritual decision, you know, that I want you to talk about. I think it's absolutely, you know, rock solid in that, you know, and everybody has a different, you know, belief system and what you know, just how they live their life, and you know, fill in the blanks that I missed. But in a nutshell, you know, Jenny didn't want to date because she didn't want to waste time. She, like she said, she's had 3 jobs. She's working hard. She definitely doesn't want to, you know, do anything from a moral or ethical standard that is, you know, not congruent with what your faith was at the time. And so literally, the good Lord gave her a download of a short, stocky brunette, green eyes, 2 young towhead kids out of diapers, talking in complete sentences. The only
The exact height they would be.
The only thing that he didn't tell her was that, oh, by the way, he'll be facing 6 to 8 years in prison. So when I show up on that day and not telling the whole story, but just, looking from an outward, visceral, kind of way, I kind of check, check the boxes. And so it wasn't that she was, because she's so grounded in her faith, wasn't taking this huge risk. Day 2 would have been, now you're taking a kind of a risk here. And it was one of those messages that you felt intuitively. It's like, well, if God was talking to you audibly, which he wasn't, but it would be like, hang on to my hand tighter than you hang on to his, and you'll be okay. And that's exactly what
that's the way to live life.
And that's what she's done the whole entire time, because, we're talking about, not being perfect. I am so far from perfect. I struggled for years, really, because I had so many ingrained years of dysfunction, of justification, rationalization, the spirit is willing, the flesh is weak moments. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, when am I going to get this thing right? And Jenny had the patience, because of her heart and mindset towards me, to hang in there, and some might say endure my moments of immaturity as I grew into a more mature walk in all aspects of life. So that's really been the staying grace in our relationship, because if you were living from the worldly standards, you would have been gone early on.
Many times over.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, that's just the reality of our lives. And I refuse to shrink back from that. That's really what's grounded us as we live life together.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'd ever shrink back from any of that, right? And so what I hear you say is that there was a huge faith-based and maybe a spiritual relationship with your higher power, God. I think you used God as your higher power, that really kind of led some of this, what would have been really scary, I would think. I would think it would be a kind of a scary moment for you, Jenny, to go, I'm going to do what?
Yeah, but there was so many details in that download, like things about his personality, that he would have more freckles than I have, which is a hard thing to beat, and the exact size of his kids, and that the girl would be this tall and the boy would be that tall, and they would be very blonde and he would be very brunette. I mean, there were just so many precise things, be they in the physical or just in the personality. And I have, and he will attest to this, I want to say a strong, I don't want to say domineering, I want to say strong personality. So I know, like I'm that kid. So I'm from the era where we still typed. So they didn't have keyboarding, they had typing. And I didn't take that elective because I wasn't going to be anybody's secretary. I was going to be the boss. So you get that kind of personality. And what I had found in the course of both youth and then young adulthood was that I would get bored in my relationships, because if a guy was going to let me dominate, then that was just going to eventually get old for me. And so to find someone as strong-minded, not domineering, as myself was really, it was so exciting, because I had not had that. And I forget where I was going with that.
Well, just why you were able to make that decision and be willing to step into that so quickly. Whew. And so, did I hear you say that you knew, or you had a premonition, and I'm not going to put words into your mouth, I'm trying not to, that you had already seen Scott, and you had seen his kids, and you knew a lot, you knew this was coming on some level.
Right, knew this was coming. It was about a 3.5-year wait once I got that download dialed in, written out, search through travel magazines to try and find, the guy, the girl, the 2 kids, the exact size, all that. Still have that old wrinkled magazine clip to this day. And I knew. And so every time, which wasn't constant because I was busy working all the time, but when I did have a conversation with a prospect, I'd say, do you have any kids? And if he'd say no, I'd think, darn, you're so cute. That's too bad. Shucks, because I know I'm going to marry a man with 2 kids that are this size, all the whole 9 yards. And part of that was my own fear of having kids. I think if I could practice on somebody else's, see what that's like. And we went on to have 2 amazing sons together. So I have we have 2 biological children, and then I have 2 bonus children. And yep. So that's that thing, is that people quiet that inner voice, that quiet place where you get the intuition, where your real wisdom sits.
You know what, too? It's interesting you say that, because I've never really thought about that. In that, when we talk to people for the work that we do, we are trying to help them acknowledge that voice that they've heard, are hearing, or trying to squelch or let fear supersede, the intuitive piece of, we need to do something. And so, we can, with authority, actually, because we've walked down that road, say that always truth is in that voice. It's just a matter of, dissecting it,
right.
and
it's peace in the middle of the storm, not the removal of the storm. It's peace in the midst of the storm. And pulling all this into our business, we talk to people. I mean, people get our number from SAMHSA or NIDA, so we're talking things outside of the treatment industry, and then of course hospitals and treatment centers and hotlines. And intuitively, in a matter of minutes, we're trying to decide if we're going to do something that has incredible risk, incredible liability, incredible odds stacked up against it. And we're making those split decisions, sort of like we made about each other. I mean, going back to the night we met, I knew that's the man I want to marry. And it was Mother's Day, right? Mother's Day. And so after spending 5 hours together meeting at this restaurant where we sat at tables next to each other, he left and took his mother out to dinner for Mother's Day and told her, I met the woman I'm going to marry this afternoon. And so now come back forward to our business, and someone where he's suicidal, she's this, this is what's happening, and it's just fraught with like responsibility. Mm-hmm. I jump in and help them navigate their responsibility, their opportunity, their chance, when all they've heard is counter information that completely contradicts what we're telling them. And so we feel like these mavericks in this industry that's so full of tradition, and so much of it is so good, but in the next breath, let's all get angry with the relapse rates, which are atrocious. And so why wouldn't some new moves, some new ideas of coming and leading with love and following up with the gravity and not helping them feel worse, and all these things that
calling them in, not calling them out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing.
So I heard you say early on that this idea that we're powerless. That we're powerless, and I heard you not say that in an embracing, like, yeah, we're powerless, but in a no, that is absolutely not true. Talk about that for a minute.
Well, we're not contradicting that a person is not powerless over their substance that they decide to use that first time, then boom, they're powerless to stop or start that need fulfilling experience. I mean, that's a classic definition of addiction. We're talking about the influence that we have with each other, not a manipulative one, but in a healthy way. It's like in our family programming, we teach family programming as well as our intervention work. And one of the principles that we like to highlight is the middle ground, which we call interdependence. And so that means we're doing life with and for each other. And we've lost that beautiful sweet spot where we tout independence, that's the holy grail. We can all agree that enmeshment and codependence is not good, but what about the middle? And so when people, it's so funny when I talk to somebody on the phone and then, I've spoken to them for a while, and I know they're calling me because they know about the word intervention. They don't really quite understand it. And then they say, yeah, but they're in denial. I don't think they'll go. It's like, well, that's kind of why you're calling me and why we're talking, it's because we have a system in place that will expose how much you matter to them, because we can agree that they're not healthy enough to be the reason to go today. And if you want to wait until they are ready, well, they could be dead. They could be in jail. They could be divorced. They could lose their job. A lot of negative things could happen. And we don't know which one, if not all of them, it will be. So it would be like waiting for somebody to have a heart attack when you've been watching them clutching their chest for weeks on end. It's like, we don't do that with that. Why are we doing it with this? So we, in a very healthy way, show how you can get in front of somebody and not shrink back from your truth, but say it in an eloquent, respectful, kind, yet firm way, and give them the opportunity to say, if not for me, of course I will say yes to you, because you matter that much to me. And the interesting piece is that 9 out of 10 times people say yes when it was the furthest thing from their mind to go get help. 9 out of 10, and they're all very, very challenging cases. And people are jaw dropped when it's like, and I always say this, I say, I want this to go so smooth that when I'm taking your loved one to treatment, you're all kind of talking with each other and you're saying, we didn't even need Scott or Jenny. That was so easy. We could have done this on our own. And of course, that's not true, because it's all about putting a strategy together and executing that strategy and actually having a vision way beyond a person saying yes to help. I mean, there's so many people who do what we do, and that is their sole focus. And we really put ourselves in the shoes of the therapist, of the family member, and the client going to treatment. And so how can we give the family a healthy voice so they can put closure to all of this? How can we help the loved one say yes to help and walk through the doors of treatment with their head held high? How can we give the therapist information they otherwise would never get if they were just relying on the client to give it to them as they walked in a fog of denial? And how can we help that client stay longer and then ultimately increase the likelihood of success? And after 33 years of doing this work, I can confidently say we have done just that.
And so back to that word powerless, the idea is we don't want you to feel powerful if you're going to use it for ill intent.
Yeah.
So we don't want you to use your power to overpower them. That's going to boomerang and bite you in the backside is what's going to happen with that.
Mm-hmm.
But what if in a gentle and compelling and authentic and vulnerable way, I could empower you? So if we're just using our power to empower others versus overpower them, then we're doing something that we're actually designed to do. And that risk, because there's vulnerability involved, is so rewarding. And so if we weren't designed to be this way, we'd all find a desert island, right? And we'd have a little soccer ball, Wilson Jr.
And we'd be happy there.
We'd be doing our own thing. We'd be doing our own thing, but it's messy, but it's beautiful when we do life together. And we have exercised this principle and watched people on bended knee, endear someone to choose, life over death. And we've done that, in the corporate boardroom. We've done that under the bridge with the barefoot homeless girl, like every extreme, just the most amazing stories. And people are afraid of that rejection, and they are doubting their own power. And so that's why we're on that crusade to say, you are so powerful, you're so influential, you're so impacting. Are you shutting it off? So every intervention isn't a cakewalk. Like you'll say, all the jaw dropping, and that is true many, many times, but there are so many that are fraught with, either danger or fireworks or more stuff. And so that's where, even in those crazy cases, like the kid that ran me off the road, into the ditch, he listened to all the letters, but, he blew up afterwards. He was in treatment within a week. And so there's so many where, that one case and throwing everyone out and breaking chairs and they're in treatment, that double intervention, just, 10 days after. And so sometimes it takes a minute. So your power might not be a microwave oven, like instant, and it might be a crock pot. But boy, if we don't risk rising up and doing something, then we're going to keep getting what we've got.
Wow, I could not agree more, and so much power in what you're saying. And the question that is on the forefront of my mind is, are you telling me? And I hear you saying it's not simple, right? It gets really messy, and it might take a week for them to get into treatment. But are you telling me somebody in the heart of using, they've got a good high going on, they are in their heavy in their addiction, they can hear you tell them and give them that message of empowerment?
I think so. So I break it down really simplistically, and that is, I think every human being has a strong desire to want to be connected to the people that they love and care about, and we know that addiction disconnects us. And so there's principle number one. The second is that most people from one day to the other want to have some level of meaning and purpose in their life. And you can only sit and watch TV for so long or do the same thing for so long. You need to have some kind of outward focus that's fulfilling you in some way.
Satisfying.
And then I think that most people, even the ones that are suicidal, they want to live. They just don't know how to live with the pain. So there's this strong desire to want to live as long as we can. So you take those three, I think, truths, and then you put addiction in front of it, and the addiction is doing the complete opposite of those things that are instinctual, natural in all of us. So that if we can present to them, we want to be connected with you. We want to help you fulfill your destiny, your purpose in life, and we want you to live, and we want to live with you for as long as we all can. Most people go, really? I've wanted that for so long, I just didn't know how to do it. And so we're saying, here, we've got the easy button, push it. And they do. And it's so fun because when we're taking somebody to treatment, they, for me, I don't know about you, but they'll look at me, and once I've connected with them a little bit, they go, "You guys are so weird. I just, this whole thing is surreal." Mm-hmm. But there's a big part of me that feels so relieved. It's like, oh no, that's not weird to me. I mean, that's the turmoil. And or like if somebody says, "I'm scared to go," it's like, well, wait a minute, let's have a dose of reality. I'd be scared to stay. To me, it's safer if you go than if you stay. Mm-hmm. So again, the person's perspective is so twisted. You think about it, it's the people who are their greatest fan base. When do they become the enemy? Mm-hmm. And that's what happens in addiction, is everybody's against me, when in reality, no, everybody is for you. And
they're just against what's taking you away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's absolutely cheating all of us of each other. So this is so big, and so many people, like, if they're not hung up on the fear of will they say yes or no, then they're hung up on the fact that they think they have no leverage, and leverage is some people, yeah, I'd say if they're 19 and you're paying for their college education, there's some tangible leverage, but you would be amazed at the cases where there's no financial leverage, there's no tangible material mm-hmm. leverage, and emotional. Emotional and relational, how that can work. And then you're going to have that tiny percentage where not only do they say no, they don't go 10 days later, they might go 9 months later or 2 years later, and we have had the same phone number for 3 decades, so we get those calls from 25 years ago or 15 years ago. It's different amazing stories. So we know that it works, but are you willing to take that risk if you fall in that 3% that never go, that never get help, or that go but relapse or have chronic relapsing due to a mountain of pressures and life that's thrown at them? I mean, when we talk with people, we're not talking at them, we're talking with them, because A, we're both in recovery. B, we buried his mother when she fell intoxicated, face forward, snapped her neck, was in a coma, was the prognosis was she'll be a vegetable if we leave her plugged in. I mean, we buried a nephew, steroid and alcohol abuse in his 20s. He called him Uncle Daddy. Like, we have so many stories and skeletons that we traded out the closet with skeletons for the warehouse with skeletons, that we get this in a deeply personal way. We have a daughter that goes in and out of active addiction, right? The guy that I married with the little girl, and that little girl has struggled her whole life. And so we are coming from a place where we just take it upon ourselves to, if we're going to do business with somebody, if we're going to put ourselves on the line, we're just going to have them, and it's as if they were family, that it matters to us, that it's not just their sister, now it's my sister too, that sort of a thing. And that's what keeps us fired up. Like every case, even though there's so many things that are similar, you have that unique handprint on someone's life where their life is unique and special.
Well, it's incredible what you're talking about, and what I hear you say is that you're connecting with those innate human characteristics that they're in there, and everything that they're doing is in conflict with it, right? It's just it's incoherent, and it doesn't mesh, and it's painful. And you're coming in and saying, look, this is still part of who you really are. Let's talk to that part, because that part is powerful, right? It's all this other stuff that's messing you up. This is powerful. And yeah, I could not agree more. But I hear you telling me, I mean, I know over the years, addiction recovery has changed significantly. But are you still seeing a huge portion of the industry doing it differently?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm really doing it the same as they have, and the relapse rates have not changed really much since we started back in '88. And I kind of just laugh when I know that in the meeting halls we hear about, not doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, that definition of insanity. And it's like I turn my head like a dog, like, what? That's what treatment's doing. The same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, and they're not getting it.
And yet, look at the one who went to 3 fancy places and then they got it in the county facility. And now he is doing fantastic and owns a treatment center and is rocking his recovery. So there's always going to be truth on both sides of the table. The experience is going to be different.
And we've been doing family programming for about 10 years. And again, we measure our success, our long-term success, which is the most important to us, by the lack of phone calls we get. Because we have given every single person we have ever helped, family, not every single client, because they might still be too unhealthy to want to give them our number, but nevertheless, I mean,
the family of the client.
We have, every month, 1, 2, sometimes 3 times a month family programs, 4 to 6, 8 sometimes interventions a month that we've been doing, 33 years of this. So a lot of people have our number that has not changed for 3 decades. And so if we're not getting phone calls, it's not because they don't like us, because we go into deep waters with people. I mean, we make people cry. And so we know what we're doing works. So here's my point. We all hear that it's a family illness, this thing called addiction, or really just dysfunction is a family problem for sure. But we don't hear it being touted as a family recovery. I mean, you just don't hear that. And I get it. It's because there's so many families who are dysfunctional, and it's like too scary to bring my family in because they're going to micromanage me or police me, or while I was getting all my help, they were sitting around watching, their soap operas, not doing anything, eating bonbons. And so, are they doing anything to help, grow and develop themselves? Typically not. And so we just believe that if we could help families do the hard work that they have in front of them, like their loved ones are supposed to be doing. And I'll tell you, if we were a fly in the treatment industry watching people all day long in treatment, we would be appalled at some of the things that are going on in treatment, the downtime, the lack of accountability, the old material, the sitting around watching a film, instead of like getting some real dialogue going on. As a consumer, I'm not real happy with treatment by and large. There's a lot of good treatment going on, but let's face it, it takes more dollars to run a program that has more individual care than group care. And so, I understand that from a fiscal standpoint, but again, you look at the amount of money that's being charged for treatment, as well as the people who do what we do. I mean, we're on the low end as far as cost-wise goes. I'm appalled at what people are, it's almost predatory what these treatment centers and interventionists are charging people to do. It's not like they're doing, brain surgery. My gosh, they're just taking words and utilizing them and walking people down a road. And I mean, it's just not that complicated. It's hard work, but it's not super complicated.
But it is so passion driven. I, want to just contrast that and say there's so many people that are in the industry because they themselves are in recovery, and so there is a passion and an inspiration. Like, if anybody listening, if you remember who your favorite teacher was in grade school, or if you played sports, your favorite coach, and that goes back to the point of there's inspiration points where people compel you, urge you, believe in you,
Motivate
and
you.
you've got some tech that's like so new in recovery, and he's going to be that turning point for that client, not the private therapist who's doing really excellent work, but I don't want to minimize the fact that even though the relapse rates are atrocious, there are amazing people doing amazing work, and there is good treatment to be found for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of factors. I don't want to minimize or simplify it either, because all the great brain research is being done in combination with the talk therapy, the EMDR, and all the things that are happening within the treatment industry. There's good work that's happening, and then of course you get part of the equation that people don't stay in treatment long enough, nor do they do what they're required to do post-treatment. Those are all factors in. I'm not a fan of when somebody says that treatment didn't work. It's like, no, that person didn't work that treatment.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's not
That's
fair.
what I was trying to get
It's
to.
not fair to ask a treatment center, what's your success rate? It's like, well, I don't know. How do you really even know?
Right.
It's not even a question. It's like, it's going to be as good as the person is willing to work it. It's just that simple. And that's a big part of what we're doing and what treatment is trying to do. So too often I find that as a therapist, their hands are tied because they're just relying on what the client tells them. If they didn't sign a consent, they can't talk to the family. There's all these factors that are at play. And so,
There's just more to the story.
There really is.
There really is.
Well, and what you say is true. I actually, my ears perked up when you said we're going to give this therapist as much information as we can when we've met with the family, and we want to help them see the whole dynamic. Because I work on the side where I'm a therapist, right? I worked at a treatment center for a while, and that was my thing, is I would mull around these clients and try and get to know them and figure out what's going on. And I realized they were telling the staff stuff that they would never tell their therapist. And I'm like, how am I supposed to really help here and get to the deep of this if you're not willing to tell me any of it, right? If there's still these secrets and somehow I'm this person that you can't share it all with.
Right.
And so I totally get that. It has to be done as a group. Now I work with facilities now, and I see their therapist, right? We go in and train their therapist. Have you talked to the family? Do you know what's going on? And we know insurances want them to do family therapy because it's obvious family therapy, like you said, right? It's a dysfunction, like it's a group dysfunction. And if the family doesn't go into therapy, you put that person back into that environment again, and they're going to expect them to behave the same way they did. They need them to if they don't understand the difference. And so I love what you're saying. It's harder, like you said. It's difficult to create that dynamic, to create that encompassing program that's going to give them everything they want. But if we're going to do treatment, shouldn't we put everything into it? Just like you guys, you're laying your heart and soul, you're vulnerable, you're out there, and you're going to treat this person like their family.
Mm-hmm.
I could not agree more. And I think we've come a long ways. I'm not going to... the treatment industry is huge. It's ginormous, and we've come a long ways, and we have a long ways to go, and I think that's fair. I love what you guys are doing to make that change and to have a voice in the industry, because it's that kind of a voice that really gets things to shift and change. I'm wondering, I know I'm sitting here going, so do you guys train? Do you guys do trainings with facilities? How do you engage other than interventions and to make this shift and this change?
Well, to go into the depth of our intervention work, we really don't have a system in play to train like therapists, and it really it boils down to the intake people too. We've done some trainings with intake people because number one, it's the most transient of a very transient industry, And so what we have found is that many people who are working in those phones, when people are inquiring about treatment, their programs and whatnot, they do not understand intervention, healthy intervention. They understand the word, but they don't understand really what a healthy intervention will look like. So we're missing that piece to it. And I know that there was a gentleman, he ran the Betty Ford program, one of the Betty Ford programs, which is now Hazleton, for 25 years, and we did a lot of work with him and personally, and both as a collective, his program. But he said, Scott and Jenny, if I could have every single admission go through a care orientation the way you guys do this, it could change the course of treatment and recovery. And it's like, yeah, we get that, but what we do have is Jenny and I, we decided, we were sitting on this idea for so long.
10 years.
And it's like, how can we get out to the general population this model that we have and we execute? Because we talk to so many people who don't, even though we're on the low end of what we charge, I mean, if you don't have two nickels to rub together, you don't have money for treatment, number one, and for sure don't have enough money for intervention. So we spent about 2 years just taking everything that we do and making videos, put it on paper, audio, and we've called it Intervention in a Box.
And we threw it up on the Thinkific platform, which is an online educational platform, a very big one. It actually just went public.
Right.
So the Intervention in a Box, so where we initially designed it for a family who had someone who wasn't completely crazy and could chair or facilitate the intervention, that it would walk them through in the course of a weekend with, 7 minutes, 19 minutes, 16 minutes, 8 minutes, 6 modules and all these little video clips that add up to 90 minutes. Like, who cannot put in a couple hours to make sure they don't put their foot in their mouth, right? So in the next breath, although that was designed and published and sits on that platform and people can buy it for just a few $100s to walk themselves through it, personally, I wish anyone in the industry that was going to do an intervention would take the course, because we constantly follow someone who we don't even want to know their name, but they're complaining about their interventionist that they used for a different family scenario. And I've had someone sit in front of me and go, well, I had an intervention done on me, and darn it, I want a do-over because this is amazing. Because I want to hear, you want to listen in at your own funeral, because nobody gets up and says, that son of a gun. They are gracious. They are mindful of the very best in you. And so that is the heartbeat behind what we do. And it's so simple. And yet again, there's little nuances to it. Like, we really pull apart so many little nuances in the middle of the model. So we did that, and we'd like to do the same with the recovery principles that we teach when we do family programming, which we do both in treatment centers and privately. But that one's not published yet. But the intervention is, and the family work will come, because that is really like our next couple of decades, is how many families can we get to come back together and reconcile? Because it's one thing to get the one person in a clear and good pathway, but it's another thing to catch the family up.
So to answer your question, though, in regards to, how could we, because you as a therapist, like you said, you get how frustrating it could be, how your hands were tied and whatnot. And I was always a big one. Like, when I was doing my individual work, I would give a homework assignment. And of course, they would come back and, like, I see your homework, and my dog ate it. It's like, okay, you're not really ready, so quit wasting my time and your time. Pass out, I would say, and they'd like, what? No, forget it. I mean, that's why.
So black and
that's
white.
why I don't want to. It's not my passion, right? Well, recovery is important to me because I lost my great career in law enforcement. I lost, 13 months of my freedom, the privilege of parenting my 2 kids on a daily. I mean, it took so much for me. So I'm sorry if I don't minimize or downplay my recovery. But nevertheless, I see too many people who are doing that. So what we do, a piece of what we do, is we help identify the issues in a person's life. And we help families kind of go through that exercise of, we all have issues, all of us do. But when do we ever stop and go, okay, I'm going to name all my issues today. I'm going to just sit down and think about, okay, I'm defensive. Okay, issue number 1. I'm angry, issue number 2.
Things that could travel with you, right, after you're in recovery from whatever that was that you're in treatment for, like these things move on.
Yeah.
And I know we just have a couple minutes till we go off the air, but I just want to say I love it when you throw up a challenge, when you'll say to clients, who's ever been bored in treatment? And literally 96%, 97%, sometimes 100% will raise their hand. And if they would want to take a hard look at these things and say, Mr. and Mrs. Therapist, please, 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 let's work on this issue. Like stand up and advocate for yourself.
Like you do when you go to the doctor.
Yeah.
You say, I have this ailment, you're helping the doctor diagnose so they can treat and you get well. But in treatment, they fold their arms and slouch down in their chair and they're saying in their head, not out loud, go ahead, try to fix me. The last therapist couldn't.
Yep.
You know?
Instead of taking responsibility, right? Responsibility for their own treatment, their own recovery, and taking that bull by the horns and saying, I'm not going to do it this way. I'm going to do it different. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's how we're going to change it, because I know when we do our intervention work, early on it was like I wouldn't like to say anything to get them there, but I would placate their craziness a little bit, where now it's like, 33 years later, it's like, no, here's what's going to be ahead of you. Here's what our expectations
Here's
are.
the deal.
If you're not willing to go, then don't. Just don't. Don't waste everybody's money and time, and when you're ready, we'll be there to support that kind of thing. So it's a different season, which I love being in this season of life. It's not that we don't care, it's not we don't care less, we just care differently.
Yeah.
So
well, and you're not enabling them, right? Because they've got so much enabling going on, as you're just putting it out there in black and white. If you're not ready, if this really isn't where you're at, then don't go, because it's not going to help anybody. But we do care. You've already connected with them. You've already let them know how much you care and how powerful they are and how many people love them. You've sent that message. They know, but they got to be serious, or it just wastes a lot of time and energy.
It really does. And so what our intervention work, Jenny coined this, was that we're a remedy for guilt, but not necessarily a remedy for grief. You will have said everything, done everything you really can do, and the best way can be done. But even with that, there's still those who will not get well.
But there are many who will. We had a family call and they said, we wanted to let you know our loved one died. And we're thinking, did he relapse? And they said, no, he didn't relapse. We just wanted to tell you that everything you said was true. You said that the letters would speak, that what we would do would matter, not just at the intervention, but onward. And he died. We found him in front of the fireplace with 15 old wrinkled letters in his coat pocket from the intervention 15 years ago. And he was clean and sober all those days. And we think that we just want you to be able to share this story, because we think our love kept him on that journey, like kept him, lifted him up on a bad day, that sort of a thing. And so I would just want to end with, if you ever heard this, it's bad intel, and it sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. There's nothing further from the truth. Our words carry such great weight. And so just be aware of the fact when you're using 10-cent words or when you're using $1 million words, that we influence each other. And best to love imperfectly than not to love at all.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I mean, what you guys speak is true. I'm just telling you, these are truths. These are human and humanity truths. And when you speak to the human heart, they hear it and you know it, right? And so I just appreciate the work that you guys are doing. It's incredible. And I will guarantee there are going to be people that are listening. They're going to want to reach out to you and learn more because of that. And so what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
So really, calling our toll-free number is really the quickest and I think easiest way. And so that toll-free number is 844-588-3267.
And you can't text it because it's been the same for 3 decades and there was no such thing as texting back then.
And then if you wanted to email us, it's info at, and then our business name, Carefrontations, and just make sure there's a S at the end, .com, and our website is carefrontations.com. So reach out anytime. We don't just keep business hours. If we're awake, we're going to answer the phone. And if we're not around, our assistant will answer the phone. And if no one's around, you can leave a message and we'll get back to you within
Very,
that day.
very soon.
Yeah.
Absolutely, very soon.
Yeah.
And the link to the intervention in a box is on the main Carefrontations website.
Mm-hmm.
So Carefrontations, we took the con out of the word confrontations. Conning doesn't work. Don't con anybody. Care about them. That works. Carefrontations.
Fair enough.
I love that. That's so indicative of who both of you are. You've shared with us just incredible story today, your own, and then how you're influencing and using your passion to help other people. I can't thank you enough for being willing to come on and share that, and for the work that you do. Thank you.
Well, thank you for setting up the platform.
Thank you,
for us to
Shelley.
share. Yeah, we really appreciate what you're doing too. What you're doing matters equally to what we're doing. So thank you.